Dear chess friends, welcome to Yazarov Chess channel and welcome to an absolutely crazy game from the official computer chess rating list website, the beautiful CCRL. We have here Leelenstein versus Stockfish 16 in a beautiful Lasker-Pelikan Sicilian, also called the Sveshnikov Sicilian, the Sicilian defense that Magnus Carlsen used to play in his World Chess Championship match in 2018 against Fabiano Caruana. This game that you see now is so crazy. I had really some issues to analyze even this one at home because in many moves that you see now I was like, what the hell is going on here? Why is black? Why is white playing this move? What's really going on the board? It was so crazy how the game went up and down. In my opinion, really one of the most spectacular games that I've seen so far played by Stockfish 16. Put your seatbelts on and enjoy in very sharp tactical battle in the Lasker Sicilian. So with the white pieces, Leelenstein open with the move e4, Stockfish responds with c5, the Sicilian, knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, c takes d, knight to d4. We have the open Sicilian, and now after knight to f6, knight to c3, we have now the Lasker-Pelikan Sicilian with the move e5, hitting the knight on d4. The knight goes many times, of course, on the square b5, hitting the weak square on d6, and now the main line is to play this advanced move d6, which is so far protecting the d6 square. The bishop and the queen are protecting the square, but the downside, long-term weakness here in this types of position is of course the backward pawn on d6, but also the weak square on d5. So the main goal for black after move d6 and bishop to g5, that's also now the main line from white's perspective, is here to hit the knight on a6, the knight on b5. When the knight retreats, we play now the move b5, and now we're threatening the move b4, the fork against both of this knight on c3 and a3. Now main lines are knight to d5 or bishop to f6. Here in this particular position, bishop to f6 was played by Leelenstein. We have now the move g takes f6, and this is now a must move for black. If you play here queen to f6, then white is getting an extra tempo against the queen. You have to retreat, and now with c4, white has already very dangerous attack. I'm not saying this is completely busted for black, that black has to immediately lose the game, but I guarantee you, you'll not get rid of this knight on d5 so easy. You lost the decisive tempo by retreating with the queen, so in my opinion, not a good way. So that's why you have to play g takes f6, which is a good thing for black the opportunity to play really a nice flexible move f5, then after f5 also to maybe play with his other pawn in the later stage, of course, then play f5 twice sort of in the same game. So as I said, this is the way to go. G takes f6 seems strange that you're creating a double pawn structure, but as I said, you're trying then to advance the pawn on f5. So we have here now knight to d5. We have f5 immediately. Of course, white doesn't want to play e takes f5. Then basically the bishop is coming into the game with a tempo, and then we can play, I think, bishop to g6, have a solid comfortable structure in front of black's king. So after e takes f5, this would be, I think, a good continuation for white. So that's why here bishop to d3. Stockfish continues with bishop to e6. This is the way to go. Now e takes f5 is even worse because the knight is then hanging, because the queen is suddenly not connected, of course, to the knight on d5. So after bishop to e6, we have now kingside castling by Leelenstein, and now comes a very interesting line with bishop to d5. Here Stockfish doesn't want to tolerate this annoying knight on d5, but now after e takes d5, knight to e7 by Stockfish, now comes a very complicated line, and it's not the mistake that black is doing here, but actually here comes a tactical shot that's common now in this particular line, knight to b5. So black is losing now a pawn. You cannot take, of course, the knight, because after a takes b5, bishop to b5, you can maybe bring the knight in between, you can also bring the queen in between, but you lose decisive material. The game is over here for black. Really wild stuff. So knight to b5 has to be met now with bishop to g7, and here black thinks that for the lost pawn we have now a decent compensation. It's now this pawn storm that's coming now. Look at this, e4, f4. As we said, we can play twice in the same game the move f5. So basically the compensation that we got for the lost pawn on b5 is now the pawn storm that's coming, these three pawns that are rolling. So this is now really dynamic position, although this is also an opposite color bishop's endgame, maybe if the attack splash for one side, if this game maybe reaches a solid normal position, this should be probably a draw, because as I said, with the opposite color bishops, many times these types of positions end with a draw. So now let's see what kind of a progress Stockfish made now in this particular position. After move bishop to g7, Leelenstein retreats now to c3. We have now the move e4, hitting the bishop, bishop to retreats, and now knight to g6. And this is now a good position for the knight. From this square, the knight can hop on f4, on h4, still has good control of the e5 square. The queen is now liberated, can come on g5. So slowly but surely, Stockfish, as I said, has a good composition, has now a beautiful attacking formation for the lost pawn. And we should not forget also, what's a very, very important thing is that the b file is opened. So rook to b8 with the support of the attack of the bishop here on this diagonal. Black has also great chances to make something also on the queen side. So I think it's a good compensation for the lost pawn. Now really an unbalanced position, really sort of position that could explode on both sides of the board. So here after move knight to g6, king to h1 was played by Leelenstein. Leelenstein wants to play f3 or f4 to lock somehow here the position on the king side. But when you do that, then of course you're vulnerable on dark squares. Bishop to d4, queen to b6 could happen. So that's why white gets out of the potential dark square attacks here with the move king to h1. We have queen to g5, f3, and now e3. Stockfish has now the beautiful space advantage. Look at this now. Very, very unpleasant now pawn to handle. Here Leelenstein plays g3, is hoping to disconnect this f pawn from the e pawn, but Stockfish is of course not allowing that. Plays now a very important move, f4. Very, really nice positional move. For instance, if you play here rook to b1, if you try maybe to protect somehow here the structure, the problem is now after f takes g3, you cannot play even rook to g1 here, because queen to h6 is, in my opinion, really, really devastating. If you play something like rook to g3, look at this, bishop to e5 is coming into the game. You can resign, I think, after a couple more moves. Knight to f4 will happen. Really, really beautiful attack here for black. So see, I'm telling you this because rook to b1 would be, I think, a very, very nice idea for white to somehow protect the b2 pawn and get somewhere with the knight, get maybe a better square for the knight. But so far it's not possible because here there's simply too much pressure. So that's why after move f4, knight to e4 was played by Leelenstein, hitting the queen. But as we said, now this long diagonal is liberated, and still we have these problems what we're going to do here on this side of the board. So that's why g4 was played by Leelenstein. Leelenstein says, okay, at least I have defended now the position on the king side. At least I have a solid structure. But Stockfish continues now, of course, with bishop to b2. Hits now the pawn, rook to b1, and now bishop to e5. This bishop is now connecting all of these pawns. This pawn on f4 is now supported by the bishop. This pawn on f4 is supporting now this unpleasant pawn on e3. This pawn on d6 is supporting the bishop. The knight is controlling also this one. So it's really a firm, solid structure, and also with the opportunity to maybe later somehow get the queen into the game. But here Leelenstein shows also its own plan. Plays now the beautiful move c4. Is of course trying to break and enter with c5 and then followed with d6. This is the way to go. c5, d6 would be then very, very dangerous to handle for black. So here we have h5. Interesting choice by Stockfish. Basically announcing maybe even the possibility to play even without castling. But this whole h-file attack is of course dangerous if you manage to open the h-file somehow. Leelenstein plays a very interesting choice, g5, locks out now the g-file, locks out now also the h-file. Here Leelenstein defended this position, I think, in a good way, but Stockfish says, okay, now when the g-file cannot be opened, I feel also secured here with my king on the g-file, because nothing can be opened now on this side of the board. Really, really interesting position. So, okay, the engine says here that it's about equal, maybe slightly better for black because of the spaces that we got here, especially because of the pawn on e3. But in my opinion, if both engines plays now the game correctly, probably this should, as I said again, end with a draw. So here Leelenstein continues with queen to c2, rook from a to b8, competing on the b file, rook to d1, and now rook takes b1, queen to b1, queen to d7. Here Stockfish is announcing a beautiful move, queen to h3, and the problem is now bishop to f1. It's not possible here to play. This would be devastating to handle, because then you get this one, knight to h4, hitting also the pawn on f3. You could maybe try bishop to g2, but now look at this. Queen to a4 is coming into the game, hitting both of these pawns. You could maybe try to simplify the game by trading off the queens, but now after a couple of trades of queens and rook to b8, actually White's rook gets a little bit overloaded to the defense of the pawn, but also to the defense of the potential promotion of this pawn on e1. Suddenly, the whole concept maybe to reach the fully endgame stage is not working here for White because of the supported pass pawn here on e3. As I said, this is now the most annoying pawn, the most annoying even piece here to handle from Black's perspective. Look at this. You can maybe try rook to b1, but now we just push the pawn further. You're trying maybe this one. We hit this one. You can pick it up, but now with rook to b1, you get even checkmated here after a couple more moves. So see, this whole idea is not working. So you cannot simplify the game. So that's why after move queen to d7, here Leelenstein says, okay, maybe I'll lose somehow here the battle, but I'll make my plan work here with the move c5. Stockfish plays d takes c5. Leelenstein advances the pawn in a beautiful way d6. Now Stockfish has also some worries what to do with his unpleasant supported pass pawn here on the default. Stockfish continues, of course, with queen to h3, hits the weak square on g2, also the weak square on weak pawn on f3. We have queen to b7, and now rook to d8, played by Stockfish. Stockfish now supports the further defense against this pawn on d6. And what should White do now? For instance, look at this, how really beautiful and dynamic position this is, because from this point on, I think this becomes really one of the most spectacular games that I've seen in my life. From this point on, it becomes really tactical. What should we do? For instance, if White continues with queen to c7. In the beginning, I was like, why is not White playing this move? Because you're attacking the rook and then you're just pushing the pawn further. It seemed to me really like a natural idea, but look at this. King to g7 you can even play here. This wasn't played in the game, but I was really curious what is the continuation here after queen to c7. King to g7 and everything is perfectly fine. For instance, you pick up now the rook, but now knight to h4 is coming into the game. You play something like rook to g1, protecting, of course, the square g2. Now we pick up this one, knight to f3. If you play bishop to f3 or queen to f3, you have to cover, and now with e2, there's simply no further progress here. It's game over here for White. What you could do is, instead of this move bishop to f3, you could, of course, play also a rook to g2. But now it doesn't get better because, again, knight to h4, you have to step back with the rook, and now f3 is going to happen. Look at this. The bishop on e5 becomes now suddenly, from the worst piece, the best piece now on the board, and now there are several checkmate threats. The bishop is hanging. You can resign immediately the game here from White's perspective. Really wild stuff. After rook to d8, as I said, queen to c7 is not working because we don't have to worry even about the rook. We play a powerful king to g7. Really wild stuff. So here after move rook to d8, that's why Leelenstein played knight to f6. Stockfish continues with king to g7. We have bishop to c4. Look at this. Weak square here on f7. And my question here for you is, what's now the best continuation here for Black? Pause the video maybe just for fun and try to see now a defensive move here for Black. Stockfish, of course, played it, but it's really hard to see. Okay, here the best defensive move is really crazy, knight to e7. This is sick, brutal chess, really wild stuff. Look at this, knight to e7. For instance, if you play d takes e7, then rook to d1 is obviously winning game. If you play here queen to e7, then you run into a beautiful tactical sequence with queen to f3. After queen to f3, you have to play king to g1. Now we deliver a couple of checks. Now we pick up the rook, and now we play a beautiful queen to c2. Look how stretched really this tactical sequence is by Stockfish. After queen to c2, you have to go somewhere with your king, and now we can even pick up the piece on c4, allow maybe here again White to pick up now the rook on d8, but now we play a beautiful king to g6. Really wild stuff. You can maybe deliver a couple of checks, but here Black has a beautiful escape route. Really crazy. Look at this. After queen to c8, we can now pick up the pawn. Now the knight is hanging. You have to play something like knight to e4 to deliver a check, but again after king to h6, there's simply no good check. Maybe queen to f8 you can play, but now we cover with the bishop. You step back, and now you deliver a check and push this pawn further. The game is over here for White. Really brutal here. Knight to e7, as I said, after queen to e7, this is game over because of queen to f3. After knight to e7, that's why Leelenstein played knight to e8. crazy move. Of course, here Stockfish simply gets back with the king on h8. We have king to g1. Leelenstein saw, of course, the potential threats of queen to f3. Stockfish plays now queen to h4 and now king to h1. Here Leelenstein is hoping to get a draw by playing perpetuals. Again, Stockfish repeated the same move again now, but after a couple moves, Stockfish makes now a huge decision and plays now the move bishop to d4. But this is not just a normal bishop to d4 move here by Stockfish. This is simply something else, because obviously the move here e2 is the huge threat, and of course Leelenstein picks up now the most annoying piece on the board, plays now rook takes d4. But Stockfish didn't play this move bishop to d4 in order to pick up the rook. Stockfish played the move bishop to d4 in order to get a new tempo with the queen here on h4 to attack the pawn on g5 and threaten here the move queen to e1. Really crazy stuff, because you cannot pick up the rook. If you play c takes d4, then queen to e7 is suddenly working, and there's simply no good check for black, so this is not working. So as I said, Stockfish sacrificed the piece just in order to get the queen and threaten queen to e1. So here's Leelenstein retreats, but now Stockfish plays another brutal move, rook to b8. Really crazy tactics. Here, if you pick up now the rook on b8, this wasn't played in the game, then you get checkmated. Look at this, queen to f2, king to h1, check, and now you again run into wild tactics. Really crazy position. I'm not sure what to say. So as I said, after rook to b8, that's why Leelenstein had to play now queen to e4. Stockfish plays now this annoying queen to g5 check, king to h1, and now rook to b2, threatening now even the checkmate here on g2. The problem is now you cannot play rook to g1. Rook to g1 as a defensive strategy is not working here, because you again run into checkmate with rook takes h2. After king to h2, now after a couple more moves, you can go whatever you want, but now queen to f2 is checkmate. If you run, of course, here to h1, then queen to h3 is again a beautiful checkmate pattern. Really crazy. So after rook to b2, you cannot compete on the g file. The only defensive move is now the move bishop to f1. Stockfish plays now the move knight to g6 in order to include a new attacker into the game, and now comes the critical moment of this particular game. Here Leelenstein makes the first blunder and the game was over. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the only defensive move here for white. Maybe you can see it, because Leelenstein didn't see it. Actually, this is a draw if white plays the game correctly. I'm not sure what happened, but probably some miscalculations. This was a blitz game. We have to say it was a faster format in CCRL, but Leelenstein made now the huge blunder that costed the game. Maybe, as I said, you can pause the video and try to see now the only defensive move here for white. So pause the video and try to see now the solution. Okay. Here, the only defensive move is now to play the move queen to a8, threatening some discoveries with the queen. And now, when the king gets on h7, now you have to play here this one, queen to d5, forcing a trade of queens, or forcing here the attack against this pawn on f7. In order to stay in the game, actually, black has to play a crazy tactic with rook to h2. But basically, what black is only gaining here is this perpetual check with the queen movement, queen f2, queen h4, and actually this would be a thematic draw. Unfortunately for the Leelenstein, but for the beauty of the game, it's okay that the engines are making mistakes. Here d2 was played by Leelenstein, but this was simply too slow. Here Stockfish immediately threatens the checkmate. This was really crazy. As I said, so far it was a perfect tactical game. Now Leelenstein made a huge blunder with d2. Queen to h4 was played. We have bishop to g2. Leelenstein is trying to cut off somehow the activity on the second rank, but now rook to d2. This is the way to go. This rook supports, of course, the defense of the pawn on d7 and is threatening, of course, here some wild tactics with rook to d1. If you promote to queen anyway here, then of course we simply pick up here the piece on d8. If you play rook to d8, then queen to e1 is simply winning the game. You can cover with bishop to f1, but now after queen to f1, the game is again over here for white. So that's why after rook to d2, here Leelenstein played queen to b1. We have now e2 by Stockfish, and whatever you do, it's game over. You can maybe deliver a check with queen to a1, but not with cover. With f6, what should you do? Knight to f6, then we simply take it, and again, this is devastating for white. So that's why after move e2, rook to g1 was played by Leelenstein. We have queen to e7. Now Stockfish has a full control of this pawn on d7, and has also here also the opportunity to promote to queen, also threaten the move rook to d1. We have bishop to h3. Leelenstein protects now the pawn on d2, but Stockfish plays queen to e3, and basically the game is over. There's nothing that can be done. Look at this. This pawn is hanging. What should you do? If you retreat again here to g2, then we simply pick up this pawn, and it's a devastating position. With this pawn on e2, the game is over again for white. So after move queen to e3, queen to a1 was played, but now knight to e5 here. Stockfish locks out now this long diagonal. We have rook to e1, and now queen to f3 was played here by Stockfish. Annoying check. You have to play bishop to g2, and now after queen to e3, we have knight to f6 by Leelenstein, f3, and after bishop to f1 in this particular position. After here the promotion of the rook in this particular position, Leelenstein resigned because of the rook to f1. Here again, my question for you is, why did, for instance, Leelenstein resign this position? Maybe you can pause the video again, try to see the winning idea here for black, because many humans wouldn't see the continuation, the best move here for black, but it's hard to see maybe. But again, just for fun, try to maybe find the winning idea here for white. So for black, pardon me, black moves and wins the game. What would you do now in this particular position? Okay, the only winning move is a beautiful, stunning rook sacrifice again on h2. After king to h2, we deliver a check. If you run here, of course, on the first rank, then you get queen to g2. You have to actually get with your king to g3, but now look at this. We get this pawn into the game. You have to take it now. Knight to g6 is coming. Queen comes into the game, and now after queen to h4, it would be, again, a beautiful and spectacular checkmate with the knight and queen activity. So, pooh. Crazy chess, crazy attacking chess, crazy defensive chess. d7 was the crucial mistake of this particular game. This was probably because they're playing in a faster time format. This is Blitz, 5 minutes on the clock plus 1 second increment. This is simply different chess. You see also the top engines are making huge blunders, but the Stockfish engine is not making this kind of tactical blunders. The only blunders that I've seen by Stockfish are more positional blunders, especially in these blocked out pawn structures, or maybe Stockfish is not seeing positional trades of pieces in a deeper way or something. But when it comes to pure tactical calculations, Stockfish is not making mistakes, because Stockfish calculates this position in a second or something. So nothing spectacular in this position for Stockfish to calculate. So as I said, d7 was the crucial mistake, and from that point on, the game was a one-way ticket in black's favor. So but still, I think a beautiful, spectacular, crazy game. Interesting, of course, ideas in the Lasker-Pelikan Sicilian. This is really one of the sharpest openings that you can play. In my opinion, still playable for black. It's one of the rare Sicilians that you can play. Magnus Carlsen, as I said, played it very often in top GM level against Fabiano Caruana. You can also check out, of course, Magnus Carlsen's game if you're interested into this opening, because it's a solid opening to meet e4. In my opinion, really one of the best ways maybe even to play against e4. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more brutal, spectacular, epic chess games like this, check out our Common Chess Games Played by Computer series. Here's the link of our playlist. Or if you want to see maybe some other Lasker-Pelikan games that we have analyzed before, here's also the link of our playlist. You can also check them out. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos. And what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.